African leaders have often faced intense criticism for their reluctance to speak out assertively on international platforms like the United Nations. Historically, many of these leaders have followed carefully constructed scripts, delivering speeches that align more with global expectations than with the true concerns and aspirations of their own people. This pattern has been particularly noticeable over the years, as some African heads of state appeared constrained, perhaps out of fear of losing foreign aid or facing diplomatic retaliation. The international community, often led by Western powers, has long held significant influence over many African nations, particularly in the form of economic assistance. As a result, African leaders have often walked a fine line, making sure their speeches do not provoke controversy, challenge powerful global actors, or jeopardize foreign financial support. However, this era of timidity seems to be giving way to a new wave of leadership, particularly in West Africa, where leaders are breaking the mold and taking bold stances on the global stage. One of the most notable examples of this shift is Burkina Faso, which has emerged as a symbol of fearless leadership under President Ibrahim Traoré. Unlike many of his predecessors, Traoré has demonstrated a willingness to challenge the global order head-on, without hesitation or concern about the potential consequences. Burkina Faso's leadership has made it clear that it will not be silenced or controlled by foreign powers, even if that means risking the loss of financial support from international organizations or facing political isolation. This bold approach marks a significant departure from the cautious diplomacy that has long characterized African leaders' interactions with global institutions like the United Nations. Under Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso has not only reclaimed its narrative, but has also taken bold steps to confront global powers on issues of justice, equality, and the treatment of African nations. The country has refused to shy away from voicing its grievances, particularly regarding the exploitation of Africa's resources and the unequal power dynamics that have long benefited Western nations at the expense of African countries. This shift was on full display during a recent United Nations General Assembly, where many African leaders once again delivered speeches that, while diplomatic, lacked the boldness needed to address the deep-rooted challenges facing the continent. Their words were carefully measured, designed not to offend or challenge the status quo, but rather to maintain the delicate balance of international relations. However, Burkina Faso stood out for its audacity, challenging the global order in a way that few African nations have dared to do before. Though President Ibrahim Traoré did not personally attend the General Assembly, one of his ministers represented Burkina Faso and delivered a powerful, nearly 30-minute speech that captivated the audience. The representative did not hold back in addressing the injustices that Africa has long endured at the hands of the West. In a stark contrast to the diplomatic caution shown by other African leaders, Burkina Faso's message was direct and unapologetic, openly criticizing the exploitation of African resources and the unequal power structures that continue to disadvantage the continent. The speech was a bold critique of the hypocrisy often displayed by Western nations when it comes to issues like democracy, development aid, and human rights. While these nations frequently champion these values in their rhetoric, their actions often tell a different story, one of exploitation, manipulation, and double standards. The speech was delivered by Basolma Bazié, Burkina Faso's Minister of State and Minister of Civil Service, and it left a lasting impression on the global audience. Bazié began his address by quoting 4 prominent figures, each of whom emphasized critical global issues. His first quote captured the moral dissonance in the global economic system, describing the world as being upside down, where bodies litter the beaches where billionaires bask. This powerful imagery highlighted the vast inequalities in the global system, where the wealthiest individuals enjoy unimaginable luxury, while the most vulnerable are left to suffer and die. Bazié's second quote underscored the urgency of the moment, stressing that humanity stands at a crossroads. He noted that we have a shared responsibility to leave a better world for future generations, a sentiment that resonated deeply with the audience. Bazié's third citation focused on the lack of political will to address global issues. He pointed out that despite the many challenges we face, humanity has the ability to overcome them. What is lacking is not the means, but the willpower. This statement was a clear indictment of the international community, particularly the powerful nations that have the resources to address global inequality but choose not to act. Finally, Bazet quoted a fourth figure, lamenting the paralysis of the United Nations Security Council and calling on the global body to shoulder its responsibility in creating a world built on solidarity and justice. These quotes set the tone for the rest of Bazet's speech, which laid bare the deliberate inequalities that continue to plague the world. Bazet pointed out that, despite countless speeches and promises, the global community has failed to address the deep-rooted inequalities that persist because of a lack of courage and political will. He illustrated this point by referencing the ongoing crises in places like Libya, the Sahel, and the war between Russia and Ukraine. Starting with Libya, Bazet highlighted the recent catastrophic flooding that claimed thousands of lives. He criticized the hollow expressions of solidarity from the international community, arguing that such gestures are little more than attempts to ease the consciences of world leaders. True solidarity, Bazet argued, would involve acknowledging the complicity of nations, particularly those involved in the 2011 NATO intervention in the ongoing disaster in Libya. He referred to the intervention, led by France under then-President Nicolas Sarkozy and endorsed by UN Resolution 1970, as a man-made disaster. The intervention, which resulted in the assassination of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, plunged Libya into chaos, and Bazet contended that the international community owes the Libyan people a sincere apology for the devastation that followed. Turning his attention to Niger, Bazet warned that the country is on the verge of becoming another Libya. He denounced what he described as diplomacy devoid of conscience, morals, dignity, justice, or peace. He accused the United Nations of hypocrisy for excluding Niger's legitimate leaders from the General Assembly, a move he attributed to external interference and manipulation by imperialist powers. Bazet emphasized that organizations like ECOWAS, the African Union, and the United Nations must transform into true organizations of the people, rather than tools used by a few heads of state to destabilize neighboring countries and eliminate their leaders. He issued a passionate call for unity, urging the people of Africa, particularly those in Senegal, Benin, Niger, Ghana, Chad, Côte d'Ivoire, and Guinea-Bissau, to stand together in solidarity against imperialist forces that seek to control and exploit the continent. Bazet also addressed the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, suggesting that some Western powers are deliberately fueling the conflict by providing military support to Ukraine. He drew a parallel between the situation in Ukraine and the fight against terrorism in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Bazet explained that these countries have been forced to defend themselves against terrorist incursions with little to no support from the international community. He noted that in Burkina Faso, 58,000 volunteers have mobilized to defend their homeland under the guidance of the country's defense and security forces. Yet, despite this self-reliance, Bazet criticized certain African leaders for labeling these patriots as malicious, a characterization he vehemently rejected. Bazet went on to condemn the international community's hypocrisy in dealing with terrorism in the Sahel. He pointed out that, while Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have pooled their resources to combat terrorism, France imposed the G5 Sahel force as an instrument of control rather than genuine support. He also highlighted the disparity in funding, noting that ECOWAS allocated only $25 million to the G5 Sahel, while pledging $2 billion for a newly established intervention force aimed at re-establishing democracies. This stark difference in resource allocation, Bazet argued, raises serious questions about the international community's commitment to combating terrorism and valuing African lives. In a scathing critique of France, Bazet accused the former colonial power of meddling in Burkina Faso's internal affairs. He claimed that France, through its African proxies, attempted to install a prime minister and other key officials in Burkina Faso's government, but these efforts were thwarted. Bazet praised Captain Ibrahim Traoré for standing firm against external pressures, even in the face of coup attempts and other repressive measures. He also highlighted the challenges Burkina Faso faces in obtaining military equipment due to blockades imposed by Western countries, particularly France. Bazet cited a case where air defense equipment, which was supposed to be supplied by Brazil, Belgium, the United States, and Canada, was cynically blocked. He called on the international community to deliver the necessary weapons for Burkina Faso to defend itself, warning that failure to do so would make them complicit in the ongoing violence. Addressing accusations from the Western press about the presence of the Wagner Group in Burkina Faso, Bazier dismissed claims that the country was relying on foreign mercenaries. He emphasized that Burkina Faso's defense and security forces, not external actors, are responsible for defending the country. In doing so, he reinforced the message that Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, is determined to remain independent and resist external interference, even in the face of immense challenges. This bold and fearless leadership marks a significant turning point for Burkina Faso and, potentially, for the entire African continent. By refusing to be silenced or controlled by foreign powers, Burkina Faso is leading the way in reclaiming Africa's narrative and asserting its rightful place on the global stage. This new wave of leadership, exemplified by Traoré and his ministers, sends a powerful message to the world. Africa will no longer be a passive player in global affairs. Instead, it will actively challenge the status quo, demand justice, and fight for its rightful place in the international community.